Hi, friends, and welcome to the Dreamer and Doer podcast. I'm your host, Bree Johnson. I designed this space to be a place that we can discuss dreaming big despite the setbacks and fears that come with it. I invite you to come along this journey with me as we embrace our stories and share our journeys. So let's dream big together and get intentional about making it happen. Friends, welcome back to the Dreamer and Doer podcast. I am so excited for another episode, and today I have another local Waco person joining me, which I love these conversations because we get to be face to face. I met our guest Elizabeth at a mastermind class this summer, so we have gotten to spend some time with each other sharing about our stories, but also digging into kind of the business side of things and what we're passionate about. So welcome my guest Elizabeth Oates. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't you tell my listeners a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll dive into some of the deeper things.
Sure. My name is Elizabeth, and as you said, I live here in Waco. I've been here for about 12 years. Before that, I lived in Dallas for about 5 years, and before that, I graduated from Baylor University, so kind of came back to Waco. Yeah. And I'm married, have 5 kids, 3 are biological, and 2 we adopted through foster care. So they keep me pretty busy when I'm not playing chauffeur and carpooling.
What are their age ranges?
Oh, age range. So they are 13, 11, 9, 4, and 2. So
keep
all over
busy.
the spectrum. Yeah, from toddlers to teens, and they keep me busy. And then I also, I'm an author and a speaker and a blogger.
Awesome. So I actually heard you speak for the first time right when we moved to Waco at our mom's group called The Nest at Antioch. And I remember hearing your story and loving it, and then we happened to meet that summer. So I would love for you to share more about that and how it's kind of incorporated into writing your books and your adult life.
Sure. So I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional family. My parents divorced when I was about 2 years old, and I had an older brother. He's 4 years older than me. And so divorce was pretty much all I ever knew. Mm-hmm. My dad was not really a part of my life. He was kind of sporadic in and out until I was about 8 years old. And then after that, we didn't see or hear from him. So it was just my brother and my mom and I. And that was pretty much our family. We moved from Ohio to Texas when I was 8. And so I really didn't even have extended family. It was just the 3 of us growing up. You know, living with a single mom, finances were always pretty tight. We lived paycheck to paycheck. Home life was pretty difficult. I always say my mom liked to work hard and play hard, and my brother and I were on our own a lot. And so I learned to grow up pretty fast and be pretty independent and take care of myself a lot. And in hindsight, you know, some of that was good, and some of that, you know, I wish had been a little bit different. But, you know, like I said, it was all I knew. And so I didn't really know that, you know, I didn't know to want for anything different. When I was in middle school, my mom remarried. And so I think at that time I thought, okay, now life will begin. And, you know, I had always longed for a dad. And so I was just beyond excited that this new father figure had entered my life. It did not quite turn out the way I wanted it to. This man had 2 daughters from his first marriage. And so he really didn't have a need for me. And he made it pretty apparent he didn't ever tried to form a relationship with me. And I was pretty much always just kind of in the way. He did bond pretty well with my brother, and they had a good relationship. But it was pretty clear in their marriage, things were really volatile. There was lots of fighting. Every day was kind of walking around on eggshells. And again, though, not really ever growing up with a dad, I didn't know what a healthy marriage looked like. And so I just kind of did my best to just fly under the radar and never try to get in the way and just try to keep the peace as much as possible. And things just kept going from bad to worse. The police were pretty frequent visitors at our home. And it's just one of those things where from the outside looking in, you would never guess it. I mean, we lived in a 4,000 square foot home. We had an airplane. My parents both drove BMWs. We had a lake house. I mean, we looked like the quintessential, picture perfect family.
Yeah.
But on the inside, you just never know what's going on behind closed doors. And at one point, the police, I guess, had come just one too many times. And my mom and I ended up having to stay in a women and children's shelter. And I think in my young life, I think I felt like that was just rock bottom, because I think I felt like girls like me don't live in places like this. And I think that kind of set me on the trajectory of this overachieving kind of lifestyle. And I was going to prove to everyone that I was better than that. And I was going to prove to my stepdad that I would do anything to make him love me. I was going to prove to everyone I went to school with that I was worthy of approval, and that they could like me. And shortly after that, my mom and stepdad ended up divorcing. And again, I think that was, obviously that was a good thing, a healthy thing. But my stepdad at that time said, I love your mom and I love your brother for who she, like a son, but I have no use for you. Wow. And that, for being, as someone who was an overachiever and really wanted people to like me for what I did, having someone say you're no use to me was super hurtful. And again, I think that just fed that inner need to be liked, and that this overachieving personality just set me into overdrive. And so I just spent the next few years in high school just trying to be in every activity and earning all those straight A's and just being this picture perfect student. And that kind of kept going through college, and just trying to constantly earn people's approval. And now, as I've learned later on in life through Enneagram, which I know you love the Enneagram, and I don't know if any of your listeners do, but if you do.
We've talked about it quite a bit.
Okay, good. So I'm a 3, which that is the achiever, which makes perfect sense now. But I think that I think part of it is the way I'm wired. I think part of it is just life circumstances, that's how I was looking for love and looking for approval and looking for friendships, was just through my achievements. Fortunately, I became a believer in high school. Right after my mom divorced, she took me to church, and I will say I went kicking and screaming. I did not want to go to church. I felt like, again, I was pretty independent. And so I felt like I've got this all under control. I do not need the church.
Had you gone before that point?
We had gone kind of off and on. We were like your Christmas and Easter Christians,
Gotcha.
Yeah. We went when good people go. And that's Christmas and Easter. And other than that, I remember going one time with a friend. She took me on like a Sunday night, and I remember wearing a Bart Simpson t-shirt, and it said, "I'm Bart Simpson. Who the hell are you?" and I remember my friend saying, "You cannot wear that t-shirt." and I think I was like 7th or 8th grade, and I was so offended. And I said, why not? It's just Bart Simpson. And this is classic, late 80s, early 90s. And she said, that's my youth worker will be so mad at you. Like, you can't wear that. And I remember being mad at her that she was making me change my t-shirt. And I remember I did not want to go after that. So anyway, that's my classic, that was my view of church, was people were judgmental and they already wouldn't like me because of a Bart Simpson t-shirt. So when my mom made me go my freshman year in high school, I already just thought youth group was cheesy and the songs they were singing were cheesy. And I felt like, these kids, I remember thinking they don't even understand what real life is. Here, I've lived in a women and children's shelter. I've seen, physical abuse and verbal abuse, and I've taken care of myself for so many years, and they don't even understand what the real world is all about. And I don't need this. I can take care of myself. And then I think God just really brought me to a really low point where I realized how lonely I was. And I just realized I'm not going to get through this without someone, and that someone just ended up being Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I think that year I just surrendered my life to Christ, and I got baptized that year. And slowly over the next 3 years in high school, just being the achiever that I was, anytime there was something offered through school, whether it was Young Life, Campus Life, FCA, I remember going to lunchtime Bible studies, early morning Bible studies, anything. If the doors were open and there was some sort of opportunity for Christian growth, I was there. It's funny because we moved around and I ended up going to 3 different high schools. Wow. And we never, after we left that town and that church, we never got plugged back into a church. But anytime there was something offered at the public school, I was there. And that's really where God met me and really where I started growing. And then same when I went to college, I never got plugged back into a church. And I think it's just because that's not how I grew up. I didn't grow up with that discipline of church.
Yeah.
But anytime there was a Bible study offered, if there was something on campus, I was there. And I got really disciplined about studying the Word of God and just spending one-on-one time with him and meeting with girls in Bible studies. And so my faith just grew exponentially. And I think that's where my love for writing and books came, was because that's how God spoke to me, was through books. I read voraciously, and God really grew my faith through books.
So when did you decide you wanted to start writing a book? Was it like in those days or later?
I've always loved writing. I remember when I was in the first grade and I won a writing contest. And so I think writing has always been in me. I actually graduated from Baylor with a business degree, and that was a huge mistake. Really? You can ask anyone. I'm that girl that can't even, balance her checkbook. If people even do that anymore, I don't know. But I can't help my third grader with his math homework. I'm terrible in business. And so after I graduated from Baylor, I got a job in business, and I was a sinking ship in that job. And I knew I wanted to go to seminary. I think becoming a believer later in life, which I think high school felt later in life. But that achiever, I kind of always felt like I was far behind my peers. I always felt like I was trying to play catch up. And so I wanted to go to seminary and ended up doing that right after I got married.
Definitely didn't know that about you.
Yes. Went to seminary, and I actually worked at Dallas Theological Seminary and went to school at the same time. And when I was there, I took quite a few writing classes and just creative arts classes, and realized that, I think this is really what I was meant to do.
All right. So let's chat about your book. And I mean, really, the business degree does help, because now you are transitioning into, business is a part of writing your books, right?
It is. I wish I could just hunker down behind my computer and write, and that would be dreamy.
5 kids.
But yes, I have 5 kids, and someone's got to pay the bills. Well, actually, my husband pays the bills. But but there is that marketing side to it. So the business does come in handy. But so it's just different. It is. There's the whole social media marketing side to it. And, I do have to pay my taxes and do all that. Yeah. So the business side is not wasted.
So would you tell us more about your most recent book that you wrote? How many have you written?
I've written 3.
3. Okay. Yes. So do you want to chat about the most recent, all of them?
Sure. Well, I can start from the beginning.
Okay.
So the first book I wrote, they say write what you know. And so the first book I wrote was a book for teenagers whose parents are divorced. I figured, let me start from the beginning. Right. So I wrote that book. It's called Dealing with Divorce, Finding Direction When Your Parents Split Up. And it's a 6-week Bible study for kids or teenagers, really, whose parents are divorced. And then there's also a leader guide that goes with it. So if a layperson or a youth worker wanted to take kids through this as a group, like a small group, they could do that, or a teenager could do it on their own. And I've also had parents buy a copy so that they just have a frame of reference of talking points, just to, a way to open up conversation with their kids. So that was my first book. My second book is called If You Could See as Jesus Sees. And it is a book for women just to help them find their identity in Christ. So to find, just deeper meaning, self-worth, self-esteem, just to see themselves as God sees them and not the way the world sees them. Because we are bombarded with just mixed messages from social media, and those messages are in our face a lot more than the messages that we're supposed to be receiving from the Word.
And then 3.
Yes. And then number 3 is called Mending Broken Branches, When God Reclaims Your Dysfunctional Family Tree. And so that book is really the book I wish I had when I was engaged, newly married. It's if you come from a dysfunctional family and now you want to create a healthier, Christ-centered family.
Yeah, I feel like that's super important. Just, even for someone who has parents that have been married, you can still have dysfunction in that and not know what a healthy marriage looks like. And I've heard that so many times from friends that have gotten married that have had divorced parents, and then entering into marriage and being like, I don't know what this is supposed to look like.
Right. And in the book, we talk about that dysfunction has a wide spectrum. You could grow up in a family where maybe your parents were just overly critical, or maybe they compared your siblings, or maybe it has nothing to do with your parents. Maybe it is just there was some unresolved sibling rivalry, or maybe you just felt a little bit misunderstood.
Yeah.
So there can be a wide spectrum all the way to the other side, which is what we think of, where there is addiction or abuse or neglect, so it can run the gamut.
What is the hardest thing about writing a book
besides
not having the time to write it?
Yeah, definitely. In my season of life with 5 kids, time is definitely a big factor. I think also sometimes I feel like I have so much I want to say, and so whittling it down to really what is the most important thing to say. What do my readers really need to know?
Kind of taking away the fluff. And
that I don't need to put everything in one book, that I can save some things.
Right? That's how you've come up with 3.
There you go.
Yeah. Planned ahead. So foster care.
Yes.
And adoption.
Yes.
Love that so much. We would love to do that one day. We're just still in the actually, I think our biggest thing is, where are we going to settle down? Because to be a foster family, we would probably have to commit to being somewhere. Not that we plan to leave Waco anytime soon. If anything, we plan to be here more long-term than anywhere else we've ever lived. Do you think you'll write a book about that?
I don't know. I have a book idea about it, but I'm not sure right now.
You feel like you have to live a little bit more in it?
Maybe. I have a book idea. It's not specifically about foster care and adoption, but it would weave it in there. So I'm kind of sitting on it right now. We'll see.
What made you guys decide to foster?
I think it was kind of always, adoption was definitely in our minds before we even had kids. We went to a church when we lived in Dallas that was very involved in international adoption. And so we kind of thought that would be the route we would take. And then we started having children, and they came much easier and much more quickly than we anticipated. And so we thought, okay, we need to table these discussions on adoption. And then, when we kind of caught our breath, we talked about it a little bit more. And, I think the bottom line is I remember looking through some Shutterfly books. I used to, before I had 5 kids, I was really good about making one Shutterfly book per year that kind of chronicled our year. And I remember looking at those books, and I told my husband, I said, every book looks the same. Every single year of our lives looks exactly the same. There's Valentine's Day and Easter and summer vacations, and then we get to Halloween and Thanksgiving and Christmas. And every single year is the same. I feel like we are just going through the motions of our lives. And yes, we check all the right boxes. We go to church and we serve in our church and we have people over. I feel like we're hospitable, and, we obviously we read our Bible and we tithe, and we check all the right boxes of, quote, the good Christian life. But at the end of the day, where are we stretching ourselves? Where are we growing? And how are we going to teach our children what sacrifice is? And how are we going to open their eyes beyond this bubble that we are raising them in? Because we live in suburban Waco,
Yeah.
And I don't feel called to live in the inner city and put them in inner city public school. I think, I know a lot of people who do that, and that is great, but that wasn't where we felt called. And so I didn't feel called to overseas missions. And so we had to take a look at some of our choices in how we were going to expose our kids to something beyond their easy, safe life. And, that kind of, we'd already talked about adoption. And so we talked to someone who worked in foster care and adoption. And she just said, I really think y'all should talk about foster care. I think you have the personalities and the family that could do it. And she said, Elizabeth, I think you have the personality where you could take a child into your home and then you could watch them leave. And I said, I don't know how to take that. But I think she's right. I think emotionally I could do that if I went into it, with that mindset of I'm going to love this child for as long as God lets me. And that's what we told our kids. We're going to love this child for as long as God lets us, whether that is a week, a month, a year. And then if God calls us to let this child go, that is what we're going to do. And so that was really the bottom line. We wanted to really expose our family and our kids to something beyond our safe little bubble. Because that's what God calls us to do. We're not meant to live safe, comfortable, easy lives.
I agree. That's kind of how we moved to Waco.
Yes, exactly.
I heard Jimmy preach a sermon, and he was like, a safe life is a boring life.
Yes, it is.
I mean, there's more, like there has to be more. And if you feel that, like there has to be more. And I was like, Kendall,
yes,
there's got to be more.
There
like
has to
we're
be
just
more.
going through the motions. I cannot, I think this was like April. So I told him, I was like, I cannot live another year and be in the exact same place as we are right now. And what would you know?
Mm-hmm.
April the following year, we moved here. So that was kind of
Wow.
our leap of faith. And it was like, hey, things have got to change. But I like that you mentioned you wanted to show your kids Jesus that way, like how to love like Jesus loves, because
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people don't foster and adopt because they want to protect their kids
Mm-hmm.
from the heartache and pain of, you know, having kids in the home and leaving.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's probably the most common excuse
Yeah.
I hear.
Yeah.
And so I like that perspective of, and then I actually had a friend post today too, that their youngest son had asked why they didn't have any babies in their house because they had been fostering. And she was like, if you're scared to not expose your kid, you don't want to expose your kids to this. Like, think about the other side, that they're going to love it and love those babies and
Yes.
want to do it. And I'm
Yes.
like, okay.
Our kids have loved it. And we've done, you know, respite care and just babysitting. We've babysat other foster kids. Our kids have loved every part of the journey. And there have been some extremely gut-wrenching parts of it. And some of it we have shielded them too. I will say that. Some of the, you know, just some of like the legal side of it and, you know, stuff they just don't need to know about. But yeah, they have. And there's been some parts, you know, I remember taking one of our kids to a family visit and it's not in the safest part of town. And there was like a fight that broke out across the street. And my son said, we were just like in the parked car, just waiting for our child to come out, our foster child at the time to come out. And my son said, Mom, can we roll up the windows? I'm not feeling very safe. And, and I went home and told my husband, I said, we were not in the suburbs, you know, but I just thought, it was kind of good for him to see, like, you know, I mean, obviously I would not endanger my child. We rolled up the windows and we actually, you know, we had like 20 minutes left until it was pickup time. And so we just rolled up the windows and we left, drove down the street to Sonic. Like it was not, I mean, there was not a shooting that was about to break out. I mean, I wasn't putting him in danger, but I thought this is kind of good for him. Like he needs to see the real world under my protection and see that not everybody lives where we live and not everyone lives in gated communities or, you know, rides a bike with a helmet on. Like, you know, these are not bad things to expose him to. And so it's been a great journey for us.
I always like asking people this question because I think it's really easy to see people's successes and not realize the hard parts of it and the messy parts. So I would love if you would share a story of when you thought you couldn't do it anymore, whether that refers to foster care and adoption, writing books, whatever it may be, but you've kept going.
Yeah. So in order to pursue writing, you have to have very thick skin, very thick skin. There's a lot of rejection that comes. I've experienced a lot of rejection from publishers, and that actually it has not been the difficult part, I think, because I don't know them. They don't know me. You know, I'm just another piece of paper on their desk.
Right.
So that has actually been okay. I think the rejection for me that is difficult to deal with is more in social media and more from, quote, Christian famous people that I actually know that have maybe turned away. And that has been really difficult. And I think over time, at one point, I reached a point where I just thought, I just can't do this anymore. Being an Enneagram 3 and an achiever. I was going to
ask how that all plays in.
It's very difficult. It is very difficult because I want to achieve and I want to earn people's approval. And in social media, sometimes you just don't. Like people just do not like you, or they just don't want to give you the attention that you think you deserve or that you're working toward. And I remember one time I told my husband, I also have sort of an edge on me where, you know, I told my husband, I said, I just won't beg people to love me. Like you're either on board with my message and with what I believe in, or you're not. And my husband said, and that's why you don't have 10,000 followers. Because, you know, I also don't play the game. You know, there's so many different I feel like sort of unethical ways you can gain followers and things like that. And I just won't do all that. And so my husband jokes like, that's why you don't have millions of followers, you know? And so I think that at one point, maybe a year or so ago, I just felt like I'm just done. Like I'm just done. Maybe I'm just going to do something else, or I don't know. I don't even know. I'm just going to go get a writing job for a nonprofit or something, I don't know. And I even talked to a woman who's much older and wiser than us. And she said, Elizabeth, I don't know how you do it. She said, your generation is filled with the meanest women I've ever met. And she said, I mean, and she's probably in her early 60s. And she said, my generation has some mean women too, but your generation is the meanest. And that really made me very sad that is how she perceives us, because I see women on social media in our generation and everybody is shouting collaboration over competition and link arms with your sisters. And, we say these things, but that's not how we're perceived. And so I did some more soul searching, and I just thought, Lord, I just prayed, what do you want me to do? I mean, do you want me to be a part of this and to continue to put myself out there for more rejection, or is my time done? And my husband even said, Elizabeth, your goal was to write one book and you did it. And then you wanted to write another book and you did it. And then you said another and you did it. He's like, you've met your goals. There is no shame in walking away now and doing something different. And so I had to pray through that. Like, am I just going to keep upping the ante and wanting to write more books, or is it time to do something different? And so I kept praying. And then along came this mastermind group that you and I were both in. And I think what it showed me was there are women who will lift you up and who will build you up and who will encourage you. You just have to find them. And if writing is my gift and encouraging other people is my gift, then I just need to go for it. And I don't need to worry about all the other peripheral stuff. I don't need to worry about the followers and the, all that kind of branding stuff, that comes with it. It's like, if I just hunker down and I do my thing, then all that other stuff will come, or it won't. And that's okay too. Yeah. But if I just stay tunnel vision and I write and I stay true to my message and what God has called me to deliver, then I'm doing okay.
I like it.
So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Because and we talked about a little bit earlier, just your story's going to reach different people.
Right.
But also that, don't worry about the followers or who's engaging or what. Like, I mean, it's just, we all got sucked into I feel like mean girl middle school cafeteria life again. It's like, oh no, just, I don't know. But I think there's people out there that need to hear your message. So when you keep putting that information out there for them, making it aware, it can only get better.
Right.
I say get better. It's already good enough. You can reach more people.
Sure.
What is one thing you'd like to see in your industry change?
I think just what I just touched on is just that, just women encouraging one another and getting away from that mentality of, if I help her, it's going to diminish what I'm doing. I think women have that sort of territorial fear. And as much as you see people on Instagram or Facebook or whatever saying they don't, I think a lot of women still do. Yeah. And I'm a 3 with a 2 wing, so I have a lot of helper in me. And I said something about that. Like, I love helping people. And my husband said, you don't really like helping people. You like helping causes. And I said, I was like, I'm super offended by that. I was like, I have, I have 5 little people I help every day. And he said, well, I mean, aside from that, but I think he's right. I do enjoy helping people, but I also am a big, I'll stand up for a cause. But I think whether you like helping people or whether you like helping causes, just that we would encourage one another and again, not see each other as competition or as threats.
I think I've been thinking about that a lot lately too, because no matter how hard you even tell yourself you're going to do it, we all still have thoughts, let's be honest, of, oh, well, maybe jealousy. But so I've been praying through that. I'm so when I have that thought, where is it coming from? Because I don't feel like I feel this way, but clearly there's this not so nice part or a thought that comes into mind. I never say them or anything, but I still want to be aware of them so they don't, sneak up on me later and just deal with them. But that pride comes in the way, or these jealousy. For me, it always comes down to, which you asked on your Instagram, what causes you to feel overwhelmed, and not just overwhelmed, but for me, it's like, well, I'm not enough. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I need to do more. And I'm not an achiever because I really, it's not, I'm a 7. You asked earlier,
Yes.
but I didn't answer. So yeah, I'm a 7. So for me, it's more like fear of missing out. I feel like the perpetual fear of missing out number, but being aware of those things in ourselves and doing self-reflection too. So if you're like, I want to be that way, I want to support, but being aware of even the times, little tiny thoughts that you don't think mean anything, why you feel that way, and do some self-reflection. Because I also have realized when we feel those things, it's if we're offended by something, it's mainly on us, not because of anyone else, you know?
Right.
And it can be dangerous to live in that offense or that jealousy or pride.
Right.
And yeah, in the long run, it's not good for anyone.
No.
Any advice for your younger self?
Oh, my younger self. Yes, so much. Well, I would have told myself, don't major in business. But I think I would say to my younger self, or just to younger people in general, is to follow your passions and your giftings. And that's one thing my husband, I always tell him, like, let's try to steer our children in the direction of their giftings. Because then, you know, I think my mom, being a single mom, she was so worried that I would end up choosing a career where I wouldn't make any money because I really wanted to major in English. And she's like, no, you'll never find a job. You'll never be able to make any money. And because I loved writing, I loved reading. That's where I felt like one thing I was good at. But you know, she's like, get a degree in business. You'll always be able to find a job. Well, yeah, if you're good at business, you know what you're doing. But
and then here you are.
And then here I am. I know.
3 books later.
So funny. So ironic. But that's what I mean. I mean, God has his hand on you. He knows the way he wired you.
And created you from birth. Like
yes.
We were talking about personalities and kids the other day, and a girl asked, well, how'd you know, when could you see their personalities? I think her baby was maybe 9 months or so. And I was like, oh, I could tell mine from the womb. And they're exactly the same. And I was like, I know that's not for everyone. I also prayed a lot about it, that God would reveal things to me. And so even now, and they're like 3-year-old, or Ezra's 3, Mila's 2, things that I saw in them, like in my womb, are things they're doing now. So I can already see things that they enjoy or don't enjoy, that I hope and pray God gives me the wisdom to steer them in those directions. Like, I don't ever want to force them to do something they don't want to do and that they're not actually good at, to where they have to experience failure in that way.
Right.
I mean, failure is not a bad thing, but I'm not going to be like, go do this because you need it, and then they still go do what they're good at anyway later.
Right. Yeah. Follow your giftings and passions. And I think God will open the door to success, and whether that is, you know, monetary success or, you know, just fulfillment.
Yeah. I mean, I know friends who they've dreamed about their whole lives were being a wife and a mom. And I think those are great dreams to have. And so don't make people tell you to do other things that don't go with that. You know, I don't know. That's might be a silly example, but that it is a dream, and it's one with value and purpose and passion.
Sure.
And so there's no other, if you don't want to pursue something else, then don't.
Right.
I'm like, I mean, get your degree if you want to. I didn't get a degree. I always ask this to everyone that comes on the show. What are 3 of your current favorite things? Would you have a weekly punch list? You should be good at this.
I know. So my 3 favorite things right now are, well, my first one is this nightly ritual that my daughter and I have. She's 11. So every night I drink Topo Chico, and she drinks, she prefers Simply Balanced by Target. It's their Target line. Yeah. And they have different flavors, watermelon. She likes grapefruit. So that is our nightly ritual. We do it every night around 8 or 8:30. So I know. She is just, I always say she's my place of respite in the family.
Yeah.
So we have all these, you know, these 2 little toddlers that just wear me out. It's fun, and, you know, crazy as they are.
So she's your youngest biological child, right?
No, she's
your middle.
Okay. Wait, is she? Yeah, she's my middle biological. Yes.
When you talked about this the other day, birth order of adoption, and like how no matter what age you adopt, it changes.
Yes.
The birth order.
That's true. Yes. People always say, well, I want to adopt younger because I don't want it to mess up the birth order. Well, you're already messing up the birth order because your youngest biological child becomes the middle. So there you go. And we see that in our kids, because when we had took in a foster child, our kids were 9, 7, and 5. So our 5-year-old became, I guess, second to the youngest. But then we took in another one. So now he's the exact middle. Mm-hmm. And so he's no longer the baby. He is an exact middle child. And he definitely gets lost in the shuffle like a middle child. Yeah. He's super laid back. And he's super easy to ignore because he's very low maintenance. And so he does function like a middle child. Whereas before, if it were just going to be the 3 of them, I could see him getting way more attention because we would have doted on him like we would have pampered him like a baby. Yeah. So it does mess with your birth order, even if you adopt younger children. Yeah. So and we didn't really want a baby. We had put in for an older age, but we ended up getting a baby. It's weird how that turns out. So
right. You're just going to get who God wants you to have.
Yeah, you're going to get and we had prayed, just give us the child that is the right fit for our family. So that is what God gave us.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So yeah. So my first thing I'm loving is my ritual with my daughter. And then the second thing I'm loving is my van. So we drive a 12-passenger van. We only have 5 kids, but so there's 7 of us. And so we have extra seats for carpooling, which I have so many carpools. I have a soccer carpool. I have a preschool carpool. I have like a Monday, Wednesday carpool. I mean, just all these different carpools. So plenty of room for carpool. And when we go on long trips, it's awesome. My daughter plays soccer out of town. And then just, when we travel to see family and stuff, it's perfect. So love my van. And then the third thing I'm loving is my church. So we had gone to the same church for 11 years. And like ever since we'd moved to Waco. Mm-hmm. And then we left about a year ago and spent a long time kind of looking for a new church. And anyone who goes through that knows it's really a painful process. And so, just loving our new church. We joined last spring and then just dedicated our 2 youngest kids there last weekend. And it was just a sweet time of feeling like we really feel at home now. We feel loved and valued and, just amazing how quickly the Lord has helped us connect and helped us find community there. So we're just so grateful to be there.
I feel the same.
Oh,
I have really enjoyed the community that we have found since we've moved to Waco. Yeah. It's definitely been needed since I don't know. It was hard moving back after being a missionary and then coming back and just like not having people really understand or like how to walk through that with us. And so I think we withdrew a lot just to protect ourselves. So it's been nice to kind of like start over, I guess.
Yes.
All right. Last question. What is a current quote, verse, or book that's encouraging you?
Okay, so my favorite quote, which I don't know if your listeners are even know who this person is, but Irma Bombeck, have you heard of her?
Mm-mm.
I know. See, you're so young, Bree. You're so cute. So she was an author and a columnist like from the 60s to the 90s. So she really is even before my time, but she's pretty famous. And she wrote about life of the suburban housewife. And so it's my favorite quote. She says, she's passed away now, but she says, "When I stand before God at the end of my life, I would hope that I would not have a single bit of talent left and could say, I used everything you gave me."
I have heard that quote though.
Yes, it's so good. And I used to almost feel bad about it because I felt like it was such kind of like a works-based quote. Yeah. But then when I realized, you know what? I am an achiever, and like achieving is how I feel close to God, like when I'm serving him. And so I don't need to feel bad about that. And I really, when I get to heaven, I do want to say, Lord, every bit of talent you gave me, I used it all. I didn't waste 1 second of my life. And so I just love this quote. I want to be able to say, I used everything you gave me, every hour, every bit of talent, every resource, I used it all, and I have nothing left, and that's why you called me home.
I like that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so glad I got to have you. I almost always forget to say this too. Where can they find you on social media, your website, because you also blog in addition to your books, and then repeat the books.
Okay.
Real quick.
So on Instagram, I'm Elizabeth Oates _. You have to add that underscore because there's another Elizabeth Oates and we are very different. So add the underscore.
Oates is Oates.
Yes, ma'am. That's right. And then on Facebook, it's Facebook author Elizabeth Oates. And then my website is elizabethoates.com. pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the books.
I'll put this on the show notes.
Oh, thank you. And then the books are Dealing with Divorce. And the second one is If You Could See as Jesus Sees.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one is Mending Broken Branches. And they're all on my website, but they're also on Amazon or christianbook.com, any of those, Barnes & Noble, any of those mainstream.
And we can put the link in the show notes too.
Awesome.
And the info so people can see those. Well, thank you again for coming. I'm so glad we got to chat.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'll come on a future episode
too. Thank you. I'd love to.